Rosalie Chris Laux was born in 1926 in the Polish town of Starowice to Paula and Isaac Laux. Rosalie and her two sisters, Hania and Regina, grew up in the years before the Second World War, and all three of them and their mother survived the horrors of the Holocaust. Isaac did not. Returning home after the war, the three sisters and their mother lived with their Christian neighbors, the Palasuskis, until they moved to the city of Lodz, which is where Chris met Miles Lerman. Miles was born in Tomasław Lubelski in 1920 and survived the war in the Soviet Union with the partisans. Chris and Miles married in 1945, stayed for a while in a displaced persons camp in Germany, and made their way to the United States, where they started a business, raised a family, and became philanthropists. Miles Lerman became one of the founders of the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And in his final years, Miles became the prime mover behind the Holocaust Memorial at the death camp of Belzec, where his mother perished during the Second World War. Miles Lerman died in 2008. Chris lived until her 90th year and passed away in May 2016. In 2014, Chris shared with us some of her stories of growing up in Poland, of surviving hell, and about the neighbors who helped her family after the war.
I come from a family of 5. I have 2 sisters, one older and one younger. My parents were secular Jews both from Orthodox families, but they themselves were secular Jews, and this is the way we were brought up. My father spoke fluent German because he was from Upper Silesia. My mother spoke fluent Russian because she was educated in central Poland. And in addition to that, they spoke Yiddish because they were brought up with the Yiddish language. They did not teach us the Yiddish language. Polish was the language we had to speak at home, and Hebrew was the language that we had to study in school when we were children. It was a small town, but still it was more or less the same kind of a town. Every town had a deptak, what they call deptak. That means a promenade street. That Saturdays and Sundays, if you wanted to go for a walk from such and such street until such and such street, on that promenade street you could see everybody, who is who, you could see that. Young boys with young girls, you know, who were already serious about each other, and young kids like myself with a bunch of other kids laughing and talking, and you know how the boys, when they want your attention at 13, pull you here and pull you there, and they always, you know, just want you to know that you are there, making a nuisance of themselves. But this is the way it was, and it was very pleasant. All along the street were stores. The stores in town were mostly Jewish. Clothing stores and grocery stores and butcher shops and all that. Of course, the butcher shops were Polish and Jewish, because the Jews didn't have any pork, so therefore, you know, they had their own stores. And the homes were very, very old. and they seemed to kind of lean already. When I was growing up, I could see how the houses are beginning to lean, and due to the fact that it was right after the Depression, times were not so good in Poland. So there were a lot of woods all around, in addition to great, wonderful meadows that after the fall rains, you know, they were really wetlands, and they used to freeze. And when those meadows, the water in the meadows froze, we used to go skating. And that was a lot of fun. Then we had a river called Kamienna, Rzeka Kamienna. It was used a lot by the lumber companies. There were a lot of lumber companies and furniture makers and tanners in town who used the running water. So we used to have beaches alongside the Kamienna River, and we were swimming and sitting on the beach and reading poetry and reading books. So this was all we used to go canoeing. There was a beautiful, beautiful lake. But in order to get a canoe, you had to rent it. And in order to rent a canoe, you couldn't give them a Jewish name because they wouldn't at least give it to you. I mean, you had to pay for it anyhow, for the hour or 2 hours. So when we went kayaking with the boys used to give a fictional Polish name just to enter it, you know, on that paper, on that loan that they are taking. And it was lovely to go on the lake on the kayak to ride. It was very lovely. My father's job was to go, well, let's put it this way. He was an appraiser of forests. The wood that was being made into timber had to be of a certain size because it was purchased either by the British or German companies. They needed the wood for mine support, and they also needed the wood for timber. So my father had to go out to the forest area, which was in eastern Poland, and when there was a tract of woods that had to be cut, he was to evaluate the property in a way as to how many trees there were available and what are the trees going to produce when they are cut, when they are turned into timber. And as a matter of fact, no sooner the woods were cut, the trees were cut, new trees were being planted in the area. They never left anything just open without using it. So 20 years later, there was a brand new forest that could be used for the same purpose. This is what my father did. My mother was a mother. Of course, she was very interested in education. Education was to her very, very important. So she was instrumental in creating the Hebrew school in our town. And she was involved in organizational work, and she was involved with poor people and soup kitchens, and an organizer anyhow, to do good for others. As a child, I went to Hebrew school. They formed a Hebrew school, not like in the form of a yeshiva, that was a religious school, but it was a secular Zionist Hebrew school, where Hebrew was taught as the language, and also every subject. Math was taught in Hebrew, which means that Polish was a foreign language in the school. First 4 years I went to Hebrew school, and then when they ran out of money and they were not able to support the school anymore, I went to a public school, which was a school for all the children in town. And this school had Jewish children and non-Jewish children. The Jewish children were in every class, in the lower classes in particular, almost as many as the non-Jewish children. I remember an incident that bothered me very, very much, and I'll never forget it. I remember that when after 4 years in Hebrew school, I was to go to public school, and mother went to register me. So the principal told her that I cannot go to the next grade because I come from Hebrew school, and therefore my education is not sufficient to meet the needs of the 5th grade. Therefore, I have to go and repeat the whole 4th year material in order to be accepted to school. Of course, my mother was very unhappy about it, and she just didn't know what is going to happen. So she said to the principal, she says, look, summer is coming, and the children have very little to do. How about, excuse me, if I hire a tutor who will go through all the things that are necessary, and you'll give her an exam before the school year starts, and if she is not capable of managing the work in the next grade, then I'll understand that it was a good decision. But I feel you ought to give her a chance. And when mother said that, I was so upset because everybody had a good time in the summertime, and here I was going to be confronted with a summer of study. And finally, when I had the exam in school, the woman who gave me the exam, she turns to my mother and she says, she's not only ready for the 5th grade, she's ready for the 6th grade. So this made me feel very, very good. Because after all, you know, there was no need for me to work really that hard all summer long in order to not to lose a year. I was an outsider to begin with, to everyone. Because the kids I went to school, to the Tarbut school, were not with me. And I befriended some kids. I didn't befriend too many Polish kids when I was in the public school. But I had a very, very good teacher. She was just wonderful. And she made me feel so good. I felt comfortable, and I was excuse me, a good student because I knew that I want to go to high school. And I knew I have to work hard in order to go to a private school where you had to pay tuition, and I had to get a scholarship in order to go to high school. It was way too expensive. So I managed, and everything, I always had to apply myself a lot more harder than anybody else. But if somebody because I was tutored to prepare to go to the public school, I knew what it takes to tutor and how to teach. So if somebody had problems with math or geography or anything like that, the teacher used to say, go and ask Rushka, they called me. Go and ask Rushka if she can tutor your child. So here and there I made myself a buck, you know. And I saved it for my high school education. And it was good. In high school it was altogether different because we were all on the same intellectual level. And I did not know anybody when I came in, and everybody else who came in at the time was a total stranger, because a lot of kids came from the Starachowice schools, while we came from the Wierzbnik schools. So we were seated at desk, 3 people at one desk. So this by itself brought you together immediately, with 2 other people. And we worked together, and we had socials together, and sports, and all kinds of things. So in high school, I would say I had a better relationship and more friends with non-Jewish kids than in Hebrew school. And let me explain to you what kind of aggravated me very, very much. As I walked to my high school, the factories began right at the end where Wierzbnik ended and Starachowice started. So the factory area was forever closed in with a very, very high fence. So there was a sidewalk along fences for about 2-3 kilometers that we were passing. And every day on those fences, there were like graffiti, signs on the fences. Żyd do Palestyny, bij Żyda, hit the Jew or kill the Jew or whatever you want. And it was not comfortable. You walk to school with a bunch of kids, and you see all those signs on the wall. They make you very, very uncomfortable. And you can't say anything. And I remember one day a Jew was coming from an opposite direction, and he was an Orthodox Jew. So he had his earlocks, and he has the black hats and the beard. A very neat, clean man. And the boys just, first of all, pushed him so that his hat fell off. And then they kicked him around, and I got very upset. And I said, why are you doing that to him? What has he done to you? So there was an expression right before the war that came up that referred to a Jew as kaik. I don't know how it originated. Yeah, I don't know what the word meant. But I heard it on occasion. I didn't even know what it means until they hit that guy and when he fell to the ground. And I say, why do you do it to him? What has he done it to you? He says, because he is kaik. And I say, so I'm a kaik too. So they say, but you are our kaik. I'm accepted. So I'm still a kaik, but I'm upset, accepted. I'm dead.